All right, let's jump into a deep dive all about this React hook. You know it can really level up your debugging, especially when you're dealing with custom hooks. It's called useDebugValue. I think you're going to like this one. So you know how you can create your own custom hooks to like encapsulate all that reusable logic.
Yeah, for sure. Custom hooks are great for that, keeping your components nice and tidy.
Right. But
Right.
okay, imagine you're debugging and you're trying to, see why your custom hook isn't doing what it's supposed to. So you open up your React Dev Tools, and all you see are these raw values just coming straight from your hook. It can be a real pain to figure out what they mean, like, in the context of your app.
Ugh, yeah, it's the worst, especially when you've got these like complex objects or
Mm.
arrays. Then you're like mentally trying to keep track of all this data
Yeah.
and put it all together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's where useDebugValue comes in, right? This hook. It lets you attach these nice labels and even custom formatting to the output of your custom hooks. Makes debugging so much easier.
yeah. It's cool because it's not just about making the values look pretty. It's about like showing the meaning behind the hook state, which is really helpful with more complex logic.
Okay, you got me hooked. Let's say we've got a custom hook that fetches data from an API and stores it in an array of objects. How could we use debug value to make sense of all that data in the DevTools?
Well, instead of just seeing an array of objects with, potentially tons of properties, you could use debug value to just show the key info for each object. Like, say you show the title and status of each API request, gives you a quick overview without having to dig through all that nested data.
Right, yeah, that's much better than just staring at a wall of data. So in the example code, it mentions that use debug value takes two arguments. The first one is the value you want to display. Makes sense. What about that second argument, format?
That's where the real magic happens. That format argument, it lets you provide a function that basically transforms your value into something more readable in the dev tools. Think of it like adding labels, highlighting things, or even doing calculations on the fly.
Okay, I'm starting to get it, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around this formatting concept. Could you give me an example of how we might use that format function to, expose the meaning behind a value?
Okay, sure. Say your custom hook manages a timestamp for when user data was last updated. Now, showing that raw timestamp in DevTools, not very helpful, right?
Oh, not really.
But with that format argument, you could write a function that transforms that timestamp into something like updated 2 minutes ago
Hmm.
or last synced yesterday.
Ah, okay, so it's not just about formatting it to be readable,
Mhm.
but also adding context. I like that.
Exactly. It's all about making the info in your DevTools as useful as possible. Oh, and speaking of useful info, remember that use debug value isn't just for simple values like booleans or strings. It can be really powerful when you're using custom context providers.
Oh, right, context. That's how we share data across our app without prop drilling. So how does use debug value fit in with that?
So imagine you have a custom context provider that manages your app's theme, light mode or dark mode. With use debug value, you can make it so that your provider doesn't just show the current theme, but also shows a preview of the colors
Mm-hmm.
right in DevTools.
Wow. So you could actually see the theme right there in the debugging environment.
Exactly. It's about giving you as much context as possible.
Okay, this is starting to click now. So use debug value, it's not just for adding labels, it's about formatting complex data and giving us context in DevTools.
Exactly.
All right, let's look at a specific example to see this in action. The source material mentions an online status hook.
Yes, let's dive into that one and see how it can change the debugging experience.
So this online status hook, I'm guessing it's using some logic to check if the user has, a connection.
Yeah, probably. It might be listening for changes in the browser status, or like pinging a server to see if it's connected. But the thing is, without useDebugValue, all you'd see is like a Boolean. True for online, false for offline.
Right. Not super helpful if you're trying to figure out why a feature isn't working, a feature that needs the user to be online.
Exactly. Like, is the user actually offline,
Yeah.
or is the hook just not updating right? It's hard to tell with just a true or false.
Yeah. Yeah. But with use debug value, we can add a label. So instead of just true, we'd see online status.
Yeah,
Online.
exactly. Small change, big difference. Imagine if this hook also tracked when the user was last active. That's when the format argument is really useful.
Right. Because a raw timestamp in DevTools, not very helpful.
Nope.
But with format, we could display it as like a relative time.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of a bunch of numbers, you'd see last active 5 minutes ago, or last active yesterday at 2:34 p.m. Much easier to understand.
Yeah, and it gives it context, like we were talking about. We're not just showing the raw data, we're giving it meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't forget about performance. Formatting a complex value every time can really slow things down,
Yeah.
especially if your hook is used in a lot of components.
Right. So it's great that the format function only runs when DevTools is open.
Yeah, for sure. Nice little optimization.
Yeah,
It's pretty amazing how far debugging tools have come in the React world.
definitely. Tools like React DevTools and hooks like useDebugValue, they've made a huge difference, give us so much more insight into our apps.
Totally. It's all about giving developers the tools they need to understand and debug their code. And useDebugValue is a perfect example of that. Simple hook, but it can really change your workflow.
Yeah. There's that saying, the best code is code that's easy to understand. And I think useDebugValue really helps with that.
Absolutely. And it's not just about making it easy for ourselves. It's about making it easy for our teammates too, and anyone else who might work on the code later.
Right. Yeah. Clear labels, good formatting, it all helps.
For sure.
Now, the source material does mention that you don't need useDebugValue for every custom hook.
Right. It's not like a magic solution. You wouldn't use it for a hook that just like manages a simple Boolean or something.
Yeah, okay. So when would you say it's most valuable to use it? I think it's really helpful when you've got a hook that's doing a lot. Like maybe it's handling a ton of data or it's doing some async stuff. Those are the times when having those extra labels in DevTools can really save you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it also depends on the project. Like if you're working on a big app
Mm.
with a team of devs, using useDebugValue for your custom hooks can really make the code easier to understand and debug for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you're adding documentation right there in the debugging tools. It makes me think useDebugValue is kind of encouraging us to be more thoughtful devs, not just thinking about making our code work, but also about making it understandable.
Yeah, I like that. When you start thinking about how your code will be debugged,
Yeah.
you naturally write better code.
Right.
It's a win-win.
This deep dive is making me think about all the data our hooks use. We can have the best labels and formatting, but if the data is bad, well, our code's not going to work right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. useDebugValue helps us understand our hooks, but it doesn't tell us anything about the data itself.
Right. So we've got this awesome tool for debugging the logic, but we also have to make sure the data is good, garbage in, garbage out, right?
Exactly. A hook might look great in DevTools, but it could still be using bad data from an API, a database, or even user input.
Yeah, good point. It's a good reminder that debugging never really ends. It's not just about fixing bugs in the code, but also about making sure the data is good.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Maybe someday there'll be a React hook. That helps us see and debug our data, just like useDebugValue helps us with our hooks.
That would be amazing. But for now, I think we've covered a lot. So what's the main takeaway for our listeners today?
I'd say the main takeaway is useDebugValue is a great tool that can really improve your debugging, especially when you're working with custom React hooks. It helps you understand how your hooks work and makes it easier to find and fix problems.
Yeah, and don't forget about that format argument. It's really important for, showing what your hook state actually means.
Definitely. It's not just about making things look pretty. It's about making debugging easier and more effective.
So if you haven't tried useDebugValue yet, go check it out. It's a small change that can make a big difference.
And as always, remember that the best debugging tools are only as good as the code they're used on. So write clear, readable code, and you'll be well on your way to building great React apps.
Awesome advice. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into useDebugValue. Happy coding, everyone!